This is Art 154, lecture on dynamics. We're going to start by looking at atmospherics. Atmospherics are pretty basic, and basically they're used to simulate 3D phenomena. So the easiest way to show it is to basically do it rather than discuss it. So let's create a box, and I'm going to zoom back with the box, and let's change the color so it's something you can actually see a little easier. Okay, so we have that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a simple array tool. Let's go grab array, and let's see, preview, and everything else is fine. Let's see what happens when we start with this on Y. There we go. Okay, so we're basically creating a collection of different boxes going back in space, as you can see. Okay, so now that we have that set up, now we're ready to actually bring in our fog. And the easiest way we do this is we literally just go render environment, and down here atmosphere, add. You can see there's fog. Hit OK. And if we at this point go and go to render this, let's see what we get. Okay, that's the fog completely on. So you can see the density is pretty high on it. So what we want to do is we'll come in and we'll kind of play around. You can see there's different options, there's different settings that you can do. And what we basically kind of want to look at is adjusting the opacity. We can increase and decrease the amount of these different things. We can bring it, actually, if you think of it as a box, or let's go 50, let's go 25 on this, and render this out, and see what happens. Okay, and now you can see en masse, it's adding it. Now, if we do layered, what that does is that does a series of slices. So rather than basically like sunglasses on the where it looks like the whole thing is in it, with this you can actually get things to start from one end, and the further back things go, the more they slice. Now, it also depends on where the location is. So if we go down now, we're inside of it, and you can see there's a horizon line because the slices go off into the horizon. And if we decrease the density to something like, let's go down to 25, and we go to render this out. Okay, we gotta go less than that, so let's go down to 5, and render that out, see what we get. Okay, and now you can see we can get this. The handy thing with this one is when people started doing video games, the processor, if you saw the horizon line on a racing game, it would have to render forever. So the nice thing about this technique is it actually enabled the horizon line to be hidden, and it made rendering much easier, much more efficient for gaming. So I'm just going to turn that off by toggling off the active. And we can do some different things with this. So that was just the basic fog. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create, let me open up all my viewports and do a create. And what we're going to use are things called helpers, atmospheric, and there's gizmos, and you'll see there's 3 different types. So the one I'm going to choose is a cylinder, and I'll draw it out in the top view, and then in the front view, and let's move it over and move it up, and I will maximize it so you can see this, and zoom in, and let's render and see what we got. And at this point we don't see anything because we haven't assigned anything to the gizmo. So if we select the gizmo, you can see you can add different items to it, and there's atmospheres and effects, and basically we are just going to add a volumetric fog to it, which is pretty simple. And now if we render this out, you can see that we have this little shape, and we can start to play around with this little shape. Let's decrease the width and the height, and let's move it up, and let's see if we can simulate something like streaming water. Let's render it again, see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see we have that. And now what I can do is I can come in and go into the setup of the volumetric fog and go down and look at it and do a couple things. Let's make the color blue. Increase that. Okay, and then a couple things we can do. We can adjust the density, we can adjust the noise, but what we want to do is the phase makes it ripple and the speed makes it move. And the turbulence will switch that over. the turbulence and then speed for the top. Okay, so the speed's coming from the top, it's moving from the top, and the phase, which we want to animate, is 0 to 4. So at this key, we'll go over, and then at key 40, we're basically going to change the phase to 4. Okay. Now if you look, you see how this animates as we go back and forth. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to basically change the width and strength. And we have to set that, you can turn off auto key, we want to set that to 60. So, okay, so now I'm going to do a little rendering of this. So material editor, render setup, sorry about that. 320 by 240, so it's small. File, I got a folder set up on my desktop I'm just going to use to save everything for this demo. And let's see, and we will save this as a .mov. I've been having problems on this computer with it, so I'm just going to do API, even though I prefer. So I'll hit save. Yes. Okay. And now we're ready to render this out. So let's render it out. Oh, and the thing I forgot to do was to advance it. So I'll go back into our render controls, active time segment. We don't need all of those, so let's do a range to 60. I like 40 because that's what we talked about doing. Okay, and let's render this out. And you can see now we have this animated texture that's moving up and down. So this is how people used to, and still in some instances, do things like waterfalls. And there's a lot of different techniques nowadays that people use, but to create the optical illusion of movement, that's how people do it still in video games. There's ways that you can do fluid dynamics now that which you wouldn't have been able to do before. So let's just double size and hit play. So now you can see, now the one thing you can see is it's slow and then it speeds up. And that's because the curve is not linear. And if we wanted the curve to be linear, what we need to do is to go back into our curve editor. And right now we have nothing set. So if I go into view, filter, and if I want to see the animated track, which is what I created, and hit OK. Okay, we're not going to see it at this point. View, let's go and just bring up everything then. Okay, so turn that all off. Hit OK, and then we have the gizmo. You can see if we go down to the gizmo here, we got the radius and those types of things. And at this point, we're still missing the basics that we need. Because basically we want global tracks is what we need. So if that's off, you're not going to get anything. So now if I turn global tracks, you can see there's environment and global volumetric fog, and you can see here's my phase, and I just have to select these 2 points and go linear, and now when I render it, it won't speed up and slow down, and we'll look at this with some of the other one. So that's a very basic setup for something like water. Let's create another gizmo, and this time we will use a sphere. So we'll go in and grab helper, manipulator, atmospheric, spherical gizmo, and we'll draw this out. And we got that set up. And I'm actually going to grab the other stuff and just get rid of it because we don't really need it. So let me grab all of those, and let's grab the tube and get rid of that. And let me turn all the graphs off, the grids off, so everything's a little easier. Okay, there we go. So a couple things I'm going to do to this is I'm going to make a fire. So I'm just going to do hemisphere, which is half. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of squish this down, make it a little skinny. And in this view, I'm going to pull it up a little. Okay. Now the other thing to remember, let's just add. Okay. And there's a fire effect. We'll hit OK. And let's just render a single frame. Single, and let's toggle off saving for the time being, and hit render. And you can see we actually have a flame that's showing up. So that's something just to be aware of. And it looks like I somehow have a environment on as well. Environment setup, color lighting, volumetric fog, turn that off. Fog, turn that off. Fire effect, let's render it one more time. There we go. Okay. So you can see there's a basic flame. And once again, we can come in and start to animate this. So let's go into the setup and see what kind of changes we can make for this. So we'll go down so you can see there's an inner, outer color, and smoke. Now if you're against a black background, you're not going to see the smoke. So if you switch that over to white, now when it kind of dies, you'll see it. And then fireballs are circle textures, like the layered words, so you have a series of textures on top of each other. Tendril basically is only going in one direction, so like it's half a circle. And you can play around with this, and what we're going to do is go in and we're going to change some of the settings. So we're going to toggle on auto key so we can animate this. We're going to do a phase of 0 to 4 just like we did in the last one. So we will go to frame 40, change that to 4. Now that's animated. And then the other thing we want is the drift, which basically causes the movement of the fire itself. So we're going to change that to 200. And now if we go down, you see they both go to 0 and they go up. And now we want to make this linear. So we'll go into the curve editor and we'll pull it up and we'll go into environment. And then you can see here's our fire effect. And we have 2 of these. You see the 2 different lines. Make those both linear. Done with that. Go back to rendering, render setup. Okay, let's do the time range again. Let's save the file but change the name. So this time it'll be fire volume. Save and render it out. Now make sure you do it in perspective. If you do it in any other viewports, you will not see. The gizmos only render in perspective. Okay, now you can see our flame going. Let's see what it looks like. And open with QuickTime. There we go. Now you can see we got our fire. So this is kind of a fake, the way that it's working. And once again, you're animating the texture, create illusion of something. Now the final kind of thing you can do with these, which is kind of fun, is they have pre-made explosions, and save that for last. Let's turn this off for the time being, minimize. So we'll do create helper manipulator. Up. Sphere, drop the sphere, and then let's maximize it on our viewport, and then we're going to add fire effect again. Now this is automated, the explosion. So what we can do is, let's go back to this one and turn it off. Even though to subtract the gizmo, it's gone. I'm going to change the smoke color once again to white so we can see that for the explosion. And then I just toggle on explosion and do setup. And it's going to ask me how long, and I said, you know, I want this 40 frames. Actually, let's do 30, so we got some time for it to die away. And then the furry is how much you animate it, and you can see it already is animating the phase. So we're already getting some animation with that. So that's the nice thing about the explosion, it's kind of automated and easy to do. So now we're ready to render this out. Go into our render setup. Let's save this and give it a new name. So this is explosion volume. Save, and let's go up, and we got our range, and go and render it out. And you can see, poof, we got it. So it's pretty quick. Minimize this out and open this. And we can look, and there's our, oh, sorry, that's the flame. I want to open this one, QuickTime. Poof. So pretty cool effect. So I just wanted to show like a industry example of this. So if we open up this with QuickTime, here's a video. This is the opening of Star Wars Episode 2, and I just want to show this sequence, which basically starts here, and this is basically simulating volumetrics. This is kind of considered the top as far as quality. But this whole thing is happening where basically the ships are flying in, and you can see all the fog, the shadows on it, all volumetric, and that's kind of interesting. It's just a series of layers in depth, but this is where it gets really interesting, is when they actually fly in, and you can see the reflection, you can see everything else moving, and it's a little hard to probably see on the rendering in the screen, but you can actually see different things responding and moving around in their depth and that kind of stuff. So there's some pretty cool things that are happening with this. And so if we look and the ship lands, and then to show a couple other things that happen when it lands, let's just wait a second. You can see this is more like a general fog that they have on the whole scene, which helps it match the background and hide the transition between the set. And she's going to come down, and we're going to get an explosion right there. And that, in some ways, was a combination of live action and other. Now, the one thing that happens with the ship that's pretty interesting, so that's actually probably a real explosion, but these, you could use a similar technique that we've kind of talked about, the fire. But a couple other things that are happening with this is if you look at the ship, you'll see when it explodes, there's actually chunks of it that are flying around, and it's actually breaking while it's blowing up. And if you want to simulate that, that's called rigid body. And a rigid body is basically simulating hard objects interacting with each other. So we're going to do a real simple example of that. So we'll just close this out, and we'll just do a new file. No, and reset everything, so I just got the same size and everything. Okay, so we're going to create a plane, and we're just going to do a simple bowling alley. So I'll draw a plane, and I'm going to do this 75 by 30, so let's just draw it out real quick, and I'll change this to 300, and this to 75. Okay, so there's our basic bowling lane. Now we want to add some pins